It was one of the most shocking and controversial cases in American criminal history. The Menendez brothers, Lyle and Erik. These two brothers are infamous for the brutal 1989 murders of their parents, José and Kitty Menendez. But with new evidence and calls for their release, this decades-old case is sparking fresh debates. Were they cold-blooded killers or victims driven to a breaking point by unimaginable abuse? Let's figure it out together and unravel the twisted story and explore where the truth really lies. So sit back, relax, and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hi everyone, welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Erin, and I am fascinated by all things cult, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. I'm posting 2 or 3 videos every single week on one of these topics, and let me tell you, this week in particular, I have some dynamite videos. I don't want to lie to you. They might be a little controversial, but I'm really excited to bring them to you guys, and just buckle up, okay? Buckle up, because the rest of October is going to be a wild ride. But let's just focus on the present moment and jump right into today's video. In the 1980s, the Menendez family appeared to have it all: wealth, success, and social standing in Beverly Hills, California. José Menendez, a high-powered entertainment executive, and his wife Kitty were raising their 2 sons, Lyle and Erik, in the lap of luxury. But behind this picture-perfect life was a nightmare. According to Lyle and Erik, they endured years of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse, all at the hands of their father. Reportedly started when they were just 6 and 8 years old, respectively. José allegedly warned the boys that if they ever spoke about it, he would kill them. Their mother, Kitty, while not directly involved, allegedly turned a blind eye to the abuse, making the home a toxic and fear-filled environment. José Menendez was originally from Cuba, and he climbed the ranks in the U.S. entertainment industry, working with companies like RCA Records and MGM. He was literally living the American dream and had extremely high standards that he wanted to uphold. His professional success enabled the family to live in luxury, but his behavior at home was allegedly tyrannical. According to Lyle and Erik, José not only demanded perfection, but also enforced his will through fear and abuse. He created an atmosphere of constant dread for the boys. Lyle and Erik claimed that their father's abuse was both sexual and emotional. Erik, in particular, detailed the ongoing assaults in letters to his cousin, which we are going to get into just a little bit later because we are actually getting access to this letter. It has been released, and it has sparked even more outcries from the public to basically exonerate both Lyle and Erik, because these letters described how it drove him into a constant state of fear. These letters depicted that José allegedly made threats to kill them if they ever spoke out about and they were constantly scared about what kinds of abuse was going to happen. It seemed like José would just fly off the handle kind of unexpectedly. And the boy's mother, Kitty, was reportedly aware of what was happening, but just chose to ignore it, either out of denial or just inability to confront the truth. In the new Netflix series that dramatizes this entire story, Kitty is depicted as this kind of angry mother and wife. I mean, it makes sense because José had a history of infidelity, but it's also like she rejected her sons, as if she resented them because her husband had those sexual desires towards her children, and instead of helping them, she looked at them as a threat. But that is just how her story is depicted in the series. I don't know if that's exactly how things were in the home or if it was just a dramatization. But she herself was described as mentally unstable, often struggling with substance and depression. So this combination of José's abusive behavior and Kitty's emotional volatility just created an overall environment that was chaotic and fear-driven, with the boys feeling isolated and trapped, just totally afraid of what could happen to them. And this is allegedly what drove them to the murders. Because if we believe Erik and Lyle's story, there was no other option for them. Their only means of survival was killing their parents. But what do you think about that? Do you believe that this could be a battered children syndrome situation where it is their only option? Or do you believe that these boys were fully capable of going to the police if there was such an issue? That seems to be the debate that is running rampant online. But now to detail the night of the murder. On the night of August 20th, 1989, Lyle and Erik Menendez armed themselves with shotguns that they had purchased a few days earlier. They entered their Beverly Hills mansion where they found their parents, José and Kitty Menendez, in the TV room. Lyle shot José first, hitting him multiple times. And as Kitty tried to escape, Erik pursued her and shot her multiple times, eventually killing her. The attack was just brutal and methodical, with the brothers later claiming that they acted out of fear, believing that their father would kill them to hide years of that sexual and emotional abuse. The murders were very calculated. The brothers had planned everything in advance. They purchased the shotguns using fake IDs, and then they waited for the weekend, knowing that their house staff would be absent, so no one would be there to witness the crime. After the killings, the brothers disposed of the weapons and spent hours trying to create this alibi. They loudly attended a movie and a dinner to appear as if they had been out of the house during the time of the murders. But despite their claims of acting out of desperation, the prosecution argued that the boys were driven by a motive, and that motive was pure greed. The brothers spent a ton of money after the murders, and this raised a lot of questions about their true intent. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars from their parents' estate on luxury items and investments, which the prosecution used to argue that the murders were premeditated for financial gain rather than self-defense actions. This conflicting narrative between fear and greed would become the central theme to the trial. So these boys spent almost $1 million of their parents' fortune. They spent $700,000 within months. They bought luxury cars, expensive vacations, and made very large investments. Lyle even bought a Porsche 911 Carrera, and he spent money on some business ventures, while Erik hired a high-priced private tennis coach to help him compete internationally. They bought designer clothes, watches, and personal services, and enjoyed a lifestyle that seemed very far removed from two grieving sons. So obviously this raised a ton of suspicion early on, but it was still not enough to lead to immediate arrests. What's equally disturbing is they lived in that house where their parents had been murdered for months. I don't even think I could live in the same place where I knew somebody died, let alone knowing and finding my parents having been shot to death by the mafia for months. But despite the murders, the brothers just seemed to be emotionally detached, and they drew even more attention to their strange actions. Their post-murder behavior contrasted sharply with the expected grief of children who had just lost their parents. And yes, people handle trauma very differently, but this behavior paired with the extravagant purchases played a crucial role in the prosecution's argument that the killings were motivated by financial gain, not self-defense. And now we come to Erik's confession, where we finally see his heart exposed. We finally start to see his grief. So he calls his psychologist and begs for an appointment, like an emergency appointment. He is grappling with guilt. And so he sought out the help of Dr. Jerome Oziel, who's a psychologist. So during therapy, Erik confesses to these murders. And the doctor, in a very controversial move, secretly recorded the confession. Now, in these series, it's depicted as him kind of being fearful for his life and battling with the idea of doctor-patient confidentiality. But I've also thought that, like, in psychological spaces, if someone is about to hurt themselves or another person, the therapist is allowed to go to the cops or go to a loved one to try to protect those people. But I'm also not a mental health professional, so if I totally have that wrong, just let me know. But Erik went into detail describing the killings, and he also shared the motive. And this is when he revealed all of those years of sexual abuse that he and Lyle had allegedly suffered at the hands of their father. And this confession would be a crucial turning point in the case. However, the information did not remain confidential because of a strange twist of fate. Dr. Oziel had a mistress named Judalon Smith. Smith, who had had a very tumultuous relationship with the psychologist, was angered by these personal matters. I mean, she was a mistress, and he apparently wasn't going to leave his wife for her. So she decided to reveal the fact that Erik had confessed to his doctor to law enforcement. Her decision to expose the recorded tapes led directly to the arrest of both of the brothers in March of 1990, a whole 6 months after the murders. Once in police custody, the brothers' spending and behavior, along with Erik's confession, solidified this case against them. Now, despite their claims of self-defense due to abuse, the evidence of their post-murder actions played a significant role in their eventual conviction. Now, the Menendez brothers' trial was an absolute media circus, broadcast live on court TV. But their defense attorney was this badass woman named Leslie Abramson. And the actress that portrays her is incredible. I haven't enjoyed a performance like that in so long. And I know most of you know, if you've been following me for a while, or I hate saying following me, if you've been subscribed for a while and watching a lot of my videos, you know I'm an actor, you know that I'm still pursuing it, and you know how much I am a nerd for like great actors. And this actress is just, she's phenomenal. She is absolutely phenomenal. If you don't like true crime reenactments or scripted series, because there is some controversy surrounding the series, especially because Ryan Murphy didn't ask permission from Erik and Lyle before writing this whole series and completing it, which I totally understand why that would be frustrating. But it's also been the catalyst for people wanting to get them out of jail, so maybe it's a good thing for them. But if you don't like true crime scripted retellings, I would watch this series simply for this actress's performance. I mean, everybody does a phenomenal job, but maybe it's because I'm a woman and I would love to have a role like that and do that well in the role, but the woman who plays Leslie Abramson is incredible. Sorry for that tangent, but let's jump into the real Leslie Abramson and what her tactics were for this trial. So she argued that the boys were victims of extreme abuse, and this pushed them to a breaking point. Both Lyle and Erik took the stand and recounted their father's alleged sexual abuse, and this brought Erik to tears during a very emotional testimony. The defense claimed the murders were an act of self-preservation. The prosecution, however, painted a much different picture, claiming that the killings were motivated by greed, as evidenced by their post-murder spending spree. And look, these boys were teenagers, but they were fit teenagers. They had a tall, larger stature. They were both expected to stay in peak physical shape. I think that there was some kind of, especially back in the day, there was not a huge understanding of what SA can look like to men. And I think there is still a little bit of a misunderstanding that men can be SA'd because they can. And I think back, in the early 90s when this trial was going on, I can only imagine that when people saw two young, fit, attractive guys who killed their parents and went on an almost $1 million spending spree basically right after, you can kind of see why this defense might not resonate with a lot of people, especially because there was such a misunderstanding of what male essay looks like. And I believe that still continues to this day. So I'm curious to know what you guys think about that. It's just, I guess, something to think about. But we're going to jump right back into Leslie Abramson and her tactics, because she was known for fiercely defending her clients, especially in emotionally charged cases like the Menendez brothers' trial. So her defense strategy revolved around portraying Lyle and Erik not as these young athletes who came from a wealthy family and had everything going for them. Instead, she tried to depict them as victims of years of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, all at the hands of their father, José Menendez. She used a lot of emotional appeals and psychological testimony to argue that the brothers had actually acted out of desperation and self-defense, but not greed. Her approach included vividly describing the and emphasizing the psychological impact it had to have had on the brothers. Her cross-examinations were intense and confrontational, and they aimed to break down the prosecution's portrayal of the brothers as these cold-blooded murderers. She painted their mother, Kitty, as complicit by turning a blind eye to all of the abuse, and argued that the brothers' mental state was shaped by trauma, and this left them feeling trapped with no other way out. One of her key tactics was ensuring that Erik Menendez took the stand and kind of hoping for an emotional breakdown on his part while he detailed the abuse, and she hoped that this would sway the jury. Abramson also aggressively challenged the prosecution's focus on the brothers' post-murder spending spree, attempting to redirect attention to the and the psychological scars that it left on them. But unfortunately for Abramson, she would lose this case, and the brothers were convicted of first-degree murder. They did get a retrial and ended up being sentenced to life without parole. And Abramson expressed significant disappointment. She deeply believed in her client's narrative of self-defense due to years of abuse. In media interviews following the trial, she remained vocal about her frustration with the legal system and the public's inability to fully understand the psychological impact of the that the brothers endured for years. She criticized the media's focus on the sensational aspects of the case, such as the brothers' lavish spending, and she felt that this overshadowed the genuine emotional trauma that the brothers had actually experienced. She had developed a close bond with the brothers during the trial, particularly with Erik, who she reportedly saw as a victim in need of her own protection. Abramson's impassioned defense style, while ultimately unsuccessful in securing an acquittal, helped shape the public narrative around the brothers, sparking debates about trauma and its impact on violent behavior, even back in the 90s. So though she lost the case, Abramson's legal tactics and dedication to her clients has made her one of the most memorable figures in the Menendez trial, and she remains a subject of legal discussions related to aggressive criminal defense. Psychologists testified that Lyle and Erik may have suffered from PTSD due to years of abuse. Prolonged trauma can lead to a distorted sense of danger, and the brothers may have genuinely believed their lives were at risk. But the jury just wasn't convinced of this. Psychologists said that PTSD can severely affect one's perception of reality. It can lead to hypervigilance and a distorted sense of danger. So this condition could explain why the brothers really believed their lives were in danger, and this resulted in the act of killing their parents. In some cases of prolonged abuse, PTSD can manifest in extreme fear, causing victims to just feel perpetually unsafe, even when the immediate threat isn't necessarily apparent. So for Lyle and Erik, the trauma that they allegedly endured could have led them to believe that their father would eventually kill them just to keep that a secret. So this heightened sense of threat is a classic symptom of PTSD, and it leads individuals to overestimate danger and react in a survival mode kind of way. So what exactly is hypervigilance? It's a state in which the mind remains constantly guarded for fear of threats. So it's often misinterpreting neutral situations as dangerous. So in the Menendez brothers' case, if the allegations are correct, their long-term exposure to it would have created a mental state where they could have genuinely believed that they were trapped with no way out, despite having financial means or the ability to flee or the opportunity to go to the police. This distorted sense of reality could have made them believe that killing their parents was their only means of survival, even though outsiders might view their actions as premeditated or motivated by greed. But like I said, the jury was just not convinced. They thought that this murder was brutal, the spending spree was inexcusable, and they just did not believe the self-defense argument. So in 1996, the brothers were found guilty of first-degree murder, and they are still in jail. Now, this case has become a powerful example of the complex intersection between psychological trauma and violent crime, with the jury ultimately concluding that despite trauma, that was an extreme act of violence, and they needed to go to jail for it. But does this really mean that they are a danger to society? Should these two boys, or men, still be locked up? Now, this is the big debate that has been going around the internet since the release of the series, because not only is there the scripted series on Netflix, there's also a new documentary out. And a lot of celebrities have been speaking out. I mean, even Kim Kardashian has spoken out, but I feel like it's partly because she's connected to Ryan Murphy and has worked on shows with him. So I don't know if it's like something she's actually passionate about or she's just wanting to get into the conversation. But she also does advocate for wrongful convictions. So maybe her heart is in the good place. I'm just trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt here. But despite Erik and Lyle being frustrated that they weren't asked for permission for anyone to write a script about their story, and this despite the fact that they're a little frustrated that the series does invoke some empathy for their parents because you do see their perspective a little bit, there are still renewed calls to reconsider the Menendez brothers' sentence, and it actually might happen. These two might end up getting out of jail. But this isn't the first time that this debate has been reignited. Former Menudo band member Roy Rossello came forward and actually claimed that José Menendez sexually abused him too. So this added credibility to the brothers' allegations. And in light of these new claims, some are really starting to question whether the Menendez brothers should be granted leniency, given the alleged years of abuse they endured. Supporters have even started petitions calling for their release. Furthermore, a newly released letter from Erik to his cousin that was written before the murders explicitly mentions abuse. So this has started to strengthen the narrative that their actions were driven by trauma. So Erik sent his cousin this letter back in the late 1980s, and he directly speaks about the sexual abuse that he endured at the hands of his father. He stated that he was living in a constant state of fear, and he was unsure when the next would happen. Now, I want to share a little bit of this letter with you because I think it was inadmissible in the first trial, but I'm not 100% sure. So let's just read through a little portion of this letter here quickly. He says, "I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. I can't explain it. He's so overweight that I can't stand to see him. I never know when it's going to happen, and it's driving me crazy. Every night I stay up thinking he might come. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid. You just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He's warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. Am I a serious wimpus? I don't know I'll make it through this. I can't handle it, Andy. I need to stop thinking about it. Now, in my opinion, this is someone who's is starting to weigh extremely heavily on him. And I don't know why it wouldn't have been admissible prior to this, but what do you guys think? I mean, with this letter, this handwritten letter, there had been allegations that a cousin who had stayed with them at the Menendez's house had spoken up to Kitty at one point about the that her sons were experiencing and was kind of shrugged off. And I think that this letter came after that experience. It sounds like the only person that Erik felt at this point that he could actually, open up to without threat was this cousin Andy. But I think eventually he did open up to Lyle because Lyle had been getting essayed prior to Erik. But I'm really curious, what do you guys think? Do you believe in this argument? Does this letter add more validity to the claims for you? It's interesting because something like this really does spark debate because it's sad at how hard it is for it to be proved. But it's also hard to believe that two kids could ever kill their parents. So it's difficult to be in the middle ground because you want to form a strong opinion about it. But when you look at two people who have been and they're detailing it and more evidence comes out and more allegations come out, I think that you're more inclined to believe those claims. And this is also back in the early 90s. They murdered their parents in 89. And if we think it's hard now to prove abuse, 30 years ago, it was even more difficult. So I can only imagine what kind of evidence they would have needed back then, considering the evidence that is needed now for anyone to believe a claim of abuse. Typically nowadays, it's multiple people have to come out and say that something happened to them for it to start to be believed. So it's heartbreaking, on one hand, that these two boys have spent 30 years, 35 years in jail when they're just trying to escape. So with all of these developments, public interest in the Menendez case has obviously surged. Many supporters argue that the new revelations provide a deeper context for the brothers' actions, suggesting that their life sentences without parole should be reconsidered. And there are tons of petitions calling for their release that have gained momentum online, with advocates arguing that the brothers acted out of survival, not greed. And additionally, these documentaries have further reignited interest, highlighting these new claims and stirring up public debate on whether justice was truly served. However, there are still those who believe that the Menendez brothers should remain behind bars, arguing that their post-murder spending spree and the calculated nature of the crime suggested a different motive, one of greed and not fear. But was it truly fear, or was it finally experiencing freedom and being able to live without fear? And the spending spree was just a manifestation of finally feeling free. Curious, because people's behavior is just so different in different situations. But this divide highlights the ongoing complexity and moral dilemmas surrounding the case, with some people seeing them as victims of their upbringing, while others still see them as cold-blooded killers who should continue to serve their sentences without parole. And this ongoing public discourse raises key questions. Can years of trauma justify violent acts, or does it merely explain them without excusing the behavior? Should their sentences be reconsidered, or do their crimes warrant them remaining incarcerated for life? These are the kinds of difficult questions that continue to surround the Menendez case today. The broader public awareness has actually put a lot of pressure on the legal system to potentially reconsider the brothers' case, with many people arguing that they were victims of lifelong abuse and acted out of desperation rather than cold-blooded intent. Now, Leslie Abramson has largely remained out of the spotlight since the Menendez brothers' convictions. However, she did make a brief and pointed statement after being asked about her thoughts of the Netflix series. Abramson called the series a piece of shit and bluntly stated that she doesn't watch shows or documentaries about the case, emphasizing that attorney-client confidentiality lasts a lifetime. She also added that she would not be making any further comments about her clients or the case. But despite her absence from the documentaries, Abramson did provide a written statement for a Netflix follow-up documentary where she expressed a desire to leave the past in the past. She remarked that while there has been renewed interest in the brothers' case, including teenage-led petitions for their release, she has said that only the court can alter their fate. This state reflects her disappointment, but provides firm closure on the case after decades of fighting for the brothers. Her refusal to participate in the Netflix show reflects her long-standing position of not engaging with media portrayals of the trial, despite her passionate defense of the Menendez brothers during their original court proceedings. The Menendez case has left a lasting imprint on American culture. The Netflix special that aired earlier this month, maybe a couple months ago, brought their story to a brand new generation, sparking debates about the justice system and the role of violent crimes. But where are they now? There were a lot of implications made in the Ryan Murphy series on Netflix, including that perhaps Erik had some homosexual tendencies and they were separate in prison. But what's truly going on with them today? Right now, they are both still in prison, serving those life sentences without parole. Despite their life sentences, they have maintained that their actions were the result of years of and fear, not greed. Over time, the Menendez brothers have expressed regret for their actions, but they continue to assert that these murders were an act of self-preservation due to prolonged physical and essay that they endured from their father. They have even gotten married while in prison. Lyle Menendez actually married twice. His first marriage was to Anna Erickson, a former model, in 1996, but they divorced in 2001 after Anna found out that Lyle had been writing to other women. Yeah. It's always so funny to me when men are like still players while in prison. I guess they just have a lot of time on their hands, but who knows? A couple years later, in 2003, Lyle married Rebecca Sneed, who was a journalist, and the two had known each other for several years before getting married, and she actually continues to still support him. Erik Menendez married Tammy Saccoman in 1999, and she has been a staunch supporter of his. She even wrote a book about their relationship titled, "They Said We'd Never Make It." In her book, she details the struggles of maintaining a relationship with a spouse in prison, and she continues to advocate for Erik's release. And despite being separate in different prisons, the brothers have maintained contact through letters and phone calls. Their marriages, even though very unconventional, have shown the strong support network that they've built even while incarcerated. So, what do you guys think? Do you believe that Lyle and Erik deserve another chance? Do their actions warrant life in prison? Do you think that they're a true danger to society, or should they be released on parole? Man, it's such an interesting case because there's also this concern of like, what would they do when they get out? Do they still have access to their parents' fortune? Would they have a means to like healthily contribute to society? Because it's kind of like Shawshank Redemption, where if you spend your whole life in prison and you don't have any skills to make money off of, and you don't really know how to exist in society as it is today, would they even want to be released? Who knows? I don't know. I would love to hear what you guys think. Let's have a healthy, polite, considerate debate down in the comments below. And, I love to have y'all leave just a little black heart if you made it through this video, because I know sometimes they get long, and I love knowing that I'm not just sitting alone in my room talking to nobody for this long. It's reassuring to know that someone is actually watching the entire video. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and stay safe out there. Ask questions and always stay skeptical. I will see you in my next video very soon. Thank you guys all so much. Talk to you later. Bye.